She doesn't scream. She counts her exits. The light hit her wrong. Too white. Too quiet. Seoul was never this quiet. Danielle sat up slowly, her body still in last night's silk blouse, and took in the room around her. Not with panic, but with the same focused calm she used on deadline. High up. That much was clear. The city below her was a blur of amber and gray through glass that stretched from where she stood to somewhere above her head. The kind of view people paid fortunes for. And the kind that also meant there was nowhere to go but down. Her laptop bag was gone. Her keycard was gone. The door across the room had no handle on her side. She wasn't bound. She wasn't hurt. She was just contained. Danielle, under her breath. Okay. Think. A door she hadn't seen opened without a sound. He didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. He was tall in a way that filled a doorway. Suit so dark it ate the light. Hair pulled back like he'd been up for hours and hadn't bothered to care. He looked at her the way people look at something they've already decided about. Calm, unhurried, completely sure of himself. And underneath all of that, something dangerous. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that knew it didn't have to prove anything. Seung-Jin, you slept. I didn't expect that. Danielle, tell me your name. Seung-Jin, Choi Seung-Jin. Though I assumed you already knew, given that you were paid to go through my files. Danielle, I was hired to audit a data package. That's a legal service. That is my job. Seung-Jin, the people who hired you used that audit to build a case against me with the federal government, which makes you, whether you meant to be or not, a liability I can't ignore. He doesn't threaten her. He lays out facts. That's worse. Danielle, you have to let me go. Seung-Jin, I can. He didn't move dramatically. Didn't raise his voice. He just set a single sheet of paper on the table between them like he was presenting a business proposal, which, she would realize later, is exactly what he was doing. Seung-Jin, the firm that contracted you, answers to the Daeseong faction. They are not your clients. They used you. And now that you've touched that data, 4 separate organizations will assume you've read it. Which means the moment you step outside, you're not free. You're a target. And Danielle. And staying here protects me from that. Seung-Jin. Staying here and working does. I have a federal audit in 90 days. My public reputation is a disaster. I've been called a ghost, a criminal, a myth, depending on which paper you read. I need someone who understands American press cycles and Korean corporate media. Someone who can build a narrative that holds under pressure. Danielle, quiet, almost to herself. You want me to do PR for you. Seung-Jin, I want you to do what you're best at. In exchange, protection, full compensation, and my word that you leave this situation with your life intact. Refuse, and I'll have a car downstairs within the hour. Unarmed, into a city that already has your photo. They say this world is heartless, but we know better. Don't let their tragedy be for nothing. Subscribe right now to join the journey of a king who gave up his crown for a queen who gave him a soul. Only a stone-cold heart could keep scrolling now. He wasn't the kind of man who needed to raise his voice to make a room go still. He just spoke. And somewhere in the way he said it, calm, almost reasonable, Danielle felt something shift underneath her feet. Not fear exactly. Something more unsettling than fear. He was giving her a choice, and she hated that the choice made sense. The lifeline that goes silent. He left her alone. And there, beside the water glass on the table, and was her phone. Battery at 12%. Screen cracked at the corner like it had been dropped in a hurry. She called Marcus Webb before she even thought it through. Her editor. The man who'd sent her to Seoul in the first place. Danielle. Marcus. I need you to hear me. I've been taken. I don't have the address, but I'm somewhere high up in the city, I think Gangnam. Marcus. Danielle. Stop. Stop talking. Danielle. What? Marcus. I know who has you, and Danny, I can't call anyone. I have kids. I have a life. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I can't be the person who makes that call. Danielle. Marcus. Dead. 3% battery. The screen went dark in her hand. She stood there for a long moment. Didn't move. The city below her glittered like it had no idea. Behind her, from somewhere near the door. Seung-Jin, he was never going to help you. The people who sent you here knew that when they chose him. Danielle, turning slowly. You were listening the whole time. Seung-Jin left the phone with 12% on purpose. I needed you to hear the truth from someone you trusted. It lands differently that way. She wanted to hate him for that. She did hate him for that. But she couldn't say he was wrong. A knock came at the door. Soft, the kind that asks permission. Not guards, not him. A woman stepped in carrying a tray with both hands, the way someone does when they're genuinely trying not to spill anything. Silver-streaked hair pinned back at the neck. Reading glasses pushed up on her head, a warmth in her face that belonged to a completely different world than the one Danielle had woken up in. Archie said you hadn't eaten. I made juk. It's rice porridge. Very simple. Very good when your stomach is unsettled. Sit. Sit. Danielle, thrown completely off. Thank you. I'm Danielle. I know who you are. He told me you do communications work. Very impressive. Studying her openly, warmly. You have a strong face. That's a good thing. Means people believe you. She turned to Seung-Jin then, without ceremony, the way only mothers can. Like his empire and his empire's consequences were simply none of her concern. Don't let her sit in this room all day. She's a person, not decoration. She left the same way she came, quietly, without needing the last word. Seung-Jin watched her go. And for just a second, before he remembered Danielle was in the room, his face did something it hadn't done since she'd met him. It softened. Danielle, she doesn't know, does she, what all of this really is? Seung-Jin, a long beat. She knows enough. She decided a long time ago what she was going to choose to see. Danielle looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time she thought, not with warmth, not yet, but with the precision she applied to every problem. Who actually are you? That night, before he left her alone for the first time, Seung-Jin set her phone on the table between them, fully charged, no lock screen, no restrictions. Call whoever you want, he said. I'll have a car ready if you decide you're leaving. He didn't wait for her to respond. He just walked out, and the door closed soft behind him. Not locked, she realized. Just closed. Danielle sat with the phone in her hand for a long time. She didn't call anyone. She didn't know why. She told herself it was just a job. That was the frame she put around it every morning. Professional distance, clean lines, deliverables. She'd built campaigns for corrupt politicians and inherited CEOs who'd never worked a day in their lives. She knew how to sell a story that wasn't entirely true. This was no different. Except it kept being different. The first event was a charity dinner. A children's hospital fundraiser in Mapo, the kind of evening where old money dressed itself in good intentions. She wore a dress his stylist had chosen, something deep burgundy that she'd never have picked for herself, and couldn't deny looked exactly right. He wore black. He always wore black. They arrived together, and the room shifted the way rooms do when someone powerful walks in. Not loudly, just a subtle recalibration, every eye finding him before pretending not to. She watched him work the crowd. Efficient, controlled. The right pressure on the right hands. And then an older woman approached him. A donor, silver-haired, tired-looking. And something in his face changed. He slowed down. Actually slowed down. He asked about her granddaughter by name. He remembered the surgery. He asked how recovery was going, and he listened to the answer in a way that had nothing to do with optics because no cameras were pointed at them. Danielle filed it away the same way she filed everything, as data. But the data kept compiling in directions she hadn't planned for. The afternoon she walked past his office and heard him on the phone, low and careful, rerouting funds to a youth shelter that had lost its government grant. The morning his mother arrived unannounced and he dropped a meeting with men who did not look like the kind of men you kept waiting, just to sit with her over tea and let her talk about nothing important. The way his staff spoke about him when they didn't know she was listening, not with fear, with something closer to loyalty, the complicated kind. None of it fit the version of him she'd needed to believe in to keep her own feelings organized. He was ruthless. She'd seen that too. She'd watched him end a business arrangement with 2 sentences and no apology, and the man across the table had gone pale in a way that said the consequences would outlast the conversation. She hadn't forgotten what he was. She hadn't forgotten how she'd gotten here. But somewhere between the camera flashes and the quiet moments he didn't know she was collecting, Danielle had stopped seeing a villain she was trapped with, and started seeing a man she didn't yet have a word for. Her mind said, "This is what manipulation looks like when it's sophisticated." Her gut said, "Then why does none of it feel like a performance?" The gala was going well. That should have been her first warning. She was mid-sentence. Something polished, something practiced, when the sound split the room open. Not 1 shot. 3. And then the kind of chaos that doesn't announce itself, it just arrives. All at once. Glasses and screaming and bodies lurching toward exits that suddenly felt very far away. She didn't see him move. She only felt it. The full weight of him. His arm coming across her like a wall, turning her body away from something she hadn't even registered yet. The impact that followed wasn't hers. It went into him. He stayed upright for exactly 3 seconds. Then his knees went. She caught him before she decided to. The hospital waiting room smelled like recycled air and someone else's fear. His men were there. 6 of them, maybe more, arranged in a silence so deliberate it felt like a held breath. One of them told her quietly that she could go, that a car was ready, that no one would stop her. She looked at the door for a long time. She sat down. Not because staying was safe, not because leaving felt wrong, but because somewhere between his arm across her chest and his blood on her hands, something had shifted without asking her permission, and she needed to understand what it was before she walked away from it. And that was the part that unsettled her. Not that she stayed, but that she wanted to. Recovery looked wrong on him. That was the first thing she noticed. How a man that controlled every room he walked into could seem so unguarded in a hospital bed. The expensive suit replaced by thin cotton. The careful stillness gone and something more human left in its place. She didn't have to stay. She knew that. And yet she pulled the chair closer anyway, and neither of them mentioned it. The days that followed were slow in a way Seoul never was. He slept more than he wanted to admit. She brought work to his bedside and pretended to focus on it. Somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd week, the silence between them stopped feeling like a standoff and started feeling like something else. Something she didn't have a clean word for yet. He told her things in that quiet. Small things at first. A memory of his father, a city he'd wanted to live in before all of this became his life. She didn't ask questions. She just listened, the way she'd learned to listen when a client was finally telling her the truth underneath the truth. He watched her face while he talked, like he was checking whether she'd flinch. She didn't. One night the room went dark early and neither of them moved to turn the lights back on. He reached for her hand in the low dark. Not demanding, not performing, just reaching. And she let him take it. That was where the line was. She knew it even then. She crossed it anyway. Weeks later, she was back in her own space, in the quiet of an ordinary morning, staring at two pink lines on something she'd bought from a pharmacy 2 blocks away, and almost put back on the shelf 3 times. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. Didn't cry. Didn't call anyone. The feeling that moved through her wasn't joy. It wasn't grief either. It was something colder and more specific. A question she hadn't let herself ask out loud yet, pressing up against the inside of her chest like it had been waiting for exactly this moment to make itself known. She thought about every moment she'd chosen to stay, every silence she'd leaned into, every night she'd told herself it was complicated, that he was different, that what she felt was real and earned and hers. And now, sitting in the gray morning light with the test still in her hand, she asked the question she'd been afraid of since the beginning. Did I fall for him? Or did captivity just teach me to? She told no one she was going, booked the flight under her middle name, paid cash for the cab from JFK, and sat in a waiting room in Midtown with her hands folded in her lap like she was there for a routine checkup and not quietly falling apart. Dr. Anaya Reeves had kind eyes and an unhurried voice, the kind that made you feel like the hour belonged entirely to you. Danielle had rehearsed what she was going to say on the plane. She'd rewritten it in her head 17 times. When the moment came, what came out was simply, I need to know if what I'm feeling is real, or if I was just scared for long enough that I confused it for something else. The questions came gently, one at a time. And did he cut you off from the people in your life? Danielle thought about Marcus, about how Seung-Jin had handed her the phone and walked away. No, he didn't. Other people cut themselves off. Did he monitor what you said? Where you went? Who you spoke to? She thought about the meetings he'd brought her into, the ones where she'd disagreed with him, out loud in front of people who clearly never disagreed with him. He'd listened. He'd pushed back. He'd changed his mind twice. No, not that I can point to. Were you afraid of him? That one sat in the air longer. At first. Yes, but not the way you mean. It wasn't. I was never afraid he'd hurt me. I was afraid of how much I was starting to understand him. Did your safety depend on keeping him happy? She opened her mouth, closed it, and thought about the night she told him his entire media strategy was built on a lie, and he'd gone quiet for a long time and then said, "You're right. Fix it." Number 1. I don't think it did. Dr. Reeves wrote something down and didn't show her what it was. The pattern you're describing doesn't map cleanly onto what we'd typically identify, she said. That doesn't mean nothing complicated happened. It means the answer isn't going to be simple. Danielle nodded like that was helpful. It wasn't. Because the part she couldn't say out loud, the part that had followed her all the way from Seoul, through security, across an ocean, was that she already knew the answers didn't fit the diagnosis. What she didn't know was what to do with a feeling that had no name to hide behind. The man without the throne. Seoul didn't stop for him. That was the first thing he noticed, that the city moved exactly the same whether he was powerful or not. The same rain on the same streets, the same neon bleeding into the dark. He called his brother first, not with explanation, not with ceremony, just with a name and a transfer code and the words, "It's yours now." His brother went quiet on the other end for a long time before he said anything. Seung-Jin didn't wait for gratitude. He hung up before it could arrive. His second-in-command came to him that same week with a name, the man who'd ordered the hit at the gala, the bullet that had gone through Seung-Jin's shoulder and changed everything. He laid the information on the table between them like an offering, a gift, an expectation. Seung-Jin looked at it for a long moment. Then he pushed it back. And the man across from him didn't understand. Seung-Jin didn't explain. Some decisions don't require an audience. He sat with it for days. what Danielle was doing in New York, what questions she was being asked, what answers she was finding. He didn't call. He had told her she could leave, and meaning it required that he stay silent while she did. But the thought that kept returning, the one that wouldn't let him sleep, wasn't whether she loved him. It was something colder and more specific than that. If she loved me because she was trapped, then I never loved her properly. Because love that requires a cage isn't love, it's just fear wearing a softer name. And he had spent enough of his life surrounded by things held together by fear to know what they looked like when they finally broke. He signed the last transfer by hand. No press release, no announcement. The empire his father had built, that he had bled to hold, that had cost him more than he'd ever admitted out loud. He let it go the way you let go of something you've been gripping too long. Not with relief, with grief. And then, slowly, with something that felt unfamiliar enough that it took him a while to name it. Lightness. For the first time in his life. Just lightness. Not because he'd won anything, because he'd finally stopped trying to. Dr. Reeves had a way of asking questions that didn't feel like questions. She'd lean forward slightly, let the silence do its work, and wait. Not impatiently, but the way someone waits when they already suspect what's coming and want you to find it yourself. They'd been meeting every Tuesday for 6 weeks. Today she asked something different. When you wake up in the morning, here, in this apartment, without him, what's the first thing you feel? Danielle opened her mouth. Closed it. The honest answer surprised her. Quiet, she said. I feel quiet. Dr. Reeves nodded slowly. Not relief? Danielle thought about that. Really thought about it. Relief implied escape. Relief was what you felt when something bad had stopped happening. She pressed a hand to her sternum, testing the feeling the way you'd press a bruise to see if it still hurt. It didn't hurt. It was just still. Like the morning after a storm when the air is clean and everything is where you left it. No, she said quietly. Not relief. Just peace. Dr. Reeves set her pen down. That distinction matters more than you know. Trauma bonds don't feel like peace when they're broken. They feel like withdrawal, each like missing a limb. People caught in them don't rest when they're separated from the person. They spiral, they obsess. The anxiety climbs until they go back. And going back is the only thing that makes it stop. Danielle was quiet. Healthy attachment, Dr. Reeves continued, can still hurt when it's apart from someone. You can miss someone real, someone good, with your whole body. But the missing doesn't destabilize you. It's sadness, not panic. Grief, not drowning. She missed him. She'd known that for weeks. But she hadn't spiraled. She hadn't called. She'd gotten up every morning, made coffee, sat with the stillness. And the stillness had held her. That was the thing she hadn't been able to name until right now. She'd been waiting to feel afraid of the quiet, waiting for it to turn on her, to become the hollow, restless ache she'd read about in every textbook description of captivity psychology. She'd been so certain the peace was a trick, a symptom wearing a mask. But it wasn't. It was just hers. She looked up at Dr. Reeves, and something behind her eyes shifted. Not dramatically, not with tears. Just a slow interior unlocking, the kind you only feel after you've been holding your breath for a very long time. So what does that mean? She asked, though she was already starting to know. Dr. Reeves picked her pen back up. It means the next question isn't whether what you felt was real. She paused. It's whether you want to do anything with it. She heard the knock and knew before she opened it. Not because she was expecting him. She wasn't. She'd spent 7 weeks in New York building a life that didn't have him in it. Therapy twice a week. A sublet in Brooklyn with a radiator that hissed. A body that was just beginning to show. She'd gotten good at mornings. At silence. at the particular piece of a life that belonged entirely to her. And then he knocked, and something in her chest recognized the sound. She opened the door. He was alone. No one behind him in the hallway, no car idling at the curb with men in it. Just him, in a coat she'd never seen, looking like someone who had flown a very long way and hadn't slept, and wasn't going to pretend otherwise. He didn't try to come in. He stood at the threshold and let her look at him. Let her take in the fact that he had come with nothing. No leverage, no armor. Just himself, which she understood now was the hardest thing he knew how to do. "I'm not here to ask you for anything," he said. "I'm not here about the baby. And I'm not here to make a case." She waited. If what happened between us was survival, if it was the situation and the fear and nothing more, then walk away. Right now. I won't follow you. I won't contact you again. You'll have everything you need and I'll disappear from your life completely. He said it like it had cost him something to rehearse, like he'd turn those words over on the plane until they were smooth, until all the wanting was pressed out of them, until what was left was purely, cleanly, hers to do with what she chose. The radiator hissed behind her. Somewhere on the street below, a cab honked twice. He didn't move, didn't reach for her. Didn't fill the silence with anything she hadn't asked for. For the first time since Seoul, since the penthouse, since the phone with 12% battery, since the night she chose to stay without understanding why, she was completely, undeniably free. No contract, no consequence, no city outside waiting with her face, just a doorway, and a man standing in it, and a choice that was entirely her own. She looked at him for a long time. She thought about what her therapist had said. The difference between peace and relief is the difference between love and survival. She hadn't felt relieved in weeks. What she felt, standing there, was something quieter. Something that had been waiting for her to catch up to it. She had asked herself the question 100 times in 100 different ways, turning it over like something she'd found on the ground and wasn't sure whether to keep. Her therapist had asked it plainly, without ceremony. If you had met him anywhere else, a conference room, a rooftop bar, a flight delay in some city neither of you lived in, would you have chosen him? Danielle hadn't answered that day. She'd looked out the window at Manhattan moving below and said she needed more time. She didn't need more time anymore. She thought about every moment she'd pushed back against him, challenged his reasoning in rooms full of people who never challenged him, told him no when yes would have been so much easier, held her position until he either argued it or conceded it. He never punished her for it. Not once. Not with silence, not with coldness, not with the slow withdrawal men use when a woman refuses to shrink. He'd argued back sometimes, hard, and she'd loved that too. The way disagreement between them felt like something alive and honest rather than something to survive. He listened. He changed his mind when she was right and told her so. That wasn't captivity talking. That was just who he was. She thought about the day he sat across from his underboss and his lawyers and his siblings and signed the documents that transferred every structure of his empire out of his hands, not to protect himself from the audit, but because she had unknowingly made him want to be someone who deserved to be chosen. She hadn't been in the room. She hadn't asked him to. He hadn't told her until weeks later, quietly, like it was a private thing, and not the most significant act of her life. He had released power before asking for love. Most people never do that. Most people don't even understand what it means. She looked at him now across the small distance of the room. No guards, no empire, just him, waiting without pressure. And the answer settled into her body the way true things do, not with fanfare, just with weight. Yes. Anywhere. Any city. Any version of her life. She would have found her way to him and she would have stayed. She crossed the room. He didn't move toward her. He let her come. You didn't beg me to stay, she said. You made sure I could leave. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides in survival. Sometimes it hides in respect. Sometimes it hides in the space between fear and freedom. If this story pulled you in, join the journey. Like, subscribe.